Commander Zixathera stood on the bridge of her warship and watched another world burn below. The orange flames spread across the surface like tiny sparks, each one marking the end of another alien city. She felt nothing as she observed the destruction. This was her job, and she was very good at it. The Caleth had conquered 17 different species in the last 200 years. Each time the pattern was the same. First, they would study the target world from far away, learning about their weapons and defenses. Then they would arrive with overwhelming force and demand surrender. Most species gave up after seeing what happened to their military bases. The smart ones surrendered quickly and were allowed to live as servants. The stubborn ones fought back and were destroyed completely. Zixathera had been part of 12 of these conquests. She understood war the way other beings understood breathing. It was simple mathematics to her. Superior numbers plus better technology equaled victory. The Caleth had never lost a war because they never fought unless they were certain to win. Her communication officer turned toward her with a confused expression. "Commander, we are receiving new target data from High Command." Zixathera walked over to examine the display. The hologram showed a small blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star. The planet looked peaceful and beautiful, covered mostly in water with scattered land masses. Initial scans showed the presence of a species that called themselves humans. "What do we know about their capabilities?" she asked her intelligence officer. The young Caleth officer pulled up more data on his screen. "They appear to be a primitive species, Commander. They have only recently developed nuclear weapons and basic space travel. Their longest space missions barely reach their own moon. They have no unified government and spend most of their time fighting among themselves." Zixathera nodded. This sounded like an easy conquest. Divided species were always the simplest to defeat. "What about their military strength?" "Primitive by our standards. They use chemical propulsion for their spacecraft and metal projectiles for most of their weapons. Their largest ships are less than 1 kilometer long. We estimate that a single Caleth battlecruiser could defeat their entire space fleet." The commander studied the tactical data with practiced eyes. The humans had hundreds of separate nations, each with their own military forces. They had been fighting constant wars among themselves for thousands of years. This actually made them weaker, not stronger. A species that could not unite against. Their own kind would never be able to resist the Caleth. "How long until we reach their system?" Zixathera asked her navigation officer. 14 standard days, Commander." "Excellent. Begin standard conquest preparations. I want full tactical analysis of their major population centers and military installations. This should be completed quickly." 3 days into their journey, the fleet encountered a small human vessel near the red planet the humans called Mars. The ship was clearly a cargo hauler, not a military vessel. It was moving slowly and appeared to be carrying mining equipment. Zixathera decided this would be a perfect opportunity to test human responses to contact with superior technology. She ordered her scout ships to intercept the human vessel. The human ship tried to run when it detected the approaching Caleth scouts, but it was far too slow. Within minutes, the Caleth had surrounded the cargo ship and disabled its engines with precision energy beams. A communication signal came from the human vessel. Zixathera was curious to hear what this primitive species would say when faced with clearly superior beings. The face that appeared on her screen belonged to a middle-aged human male with short brown hair and calm blue eyes. He wore a simple blue uniform and showed no signs of panic despite being trapped by alien warships. "This is Captain Jake Collins of the cargo vessel New Horizon. I assume you're the ones our government has been expecting." Zixathera was surprised by this response. Most species either begged for mercy or demanded to know who the Caleth were. This human seemed almost unsurprised by first contact with aliens. "I am Commander Zixathera of the Caleth Dominion. Your species will surrender unconditionally or face complete destruction." The human captain studied her for a long moment. His expression remained calm and thoughtful. I see. And how many other species have you given this same choice? The question was unexpected. Conquered species usually asked about their own fate, not about others. 17 species have fallen, before Kaleth might. Your choice is simple: surrender or join them in extinction. Jake Collins nodded slowly, as if he had expected this answer. Well, Commander, I suppose I should thank you for being honest. Most bullies try to pretend they're doing you a favor. Zixathera felt a flash of anger at being called a bully, but she maintained her professional composure. You will transmit your surrender to your leaders immediately. The human captain smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. I'm afraid I can't do that, Commander. You see, I'm just a cargo pilot. I don't have the authority to surrender on behalf of my species, but I can give you some free advice. Speak quickly. My patience is limited. Jake Collins leaned forward in his chair, his calm eyes now showing something that looked almost like pity. You might want to reconsider this whole invasion idea. Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years, and we've gotten very good at it. We don't surrender easily, and we definitely don't forgive easily. Before Zixathera could respond, the human continued. Tell your friends we're coming for you. The transmission ended as the human ship exploded. Jake Collins had somehow overloaded his ship's reactor, destroying his vessel and taking one of the Kaleth scout ships with him in the explosion. Zixathera stared at the debris field in confusion. In all her experience, defeated beings either begged for mercy or accepted their fate with resignation. They did not make threats against vastly superior forces. They certainly did not destroy themselves just to take a few enemies with them. Something about the human's final words bothered her more than she wanted to admit. The way he had said, "We're coming for you," suggested that he genuinely believed his primitive species could pose a threat to the mighty Kaleth fleet. As her ships continued toward the blue planet, Zixathera found herself thinking about Jake Collins and his strange final message. Perhaps these humans would be different from other species that Kaleth had conquered. Perhaps they would provide more of a challenge than expected. She had no idea how right she was. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains and watched the displays showing alien ships entering their solar system. The ships were massive, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Their technology was clearly far beyond human capabilities, but Lisa felt no fear as she studied the tactical readouts. She had been expecting this day for 3 years, ever since the deep space monitoring stations had detected signs of an approaching alien fleet. The loss of Jake Collins and his cargo ship near Mars had confirmed what many military leaders already suspected. Humanity was about to face its greatest challenge. How many ships are we looking at? Lisa asked her tactical officer. Current count shows 47 vessels, Admiral. The largest ones appear to be over 5 kilometers long. Our computers estimate their total firepower exceeds our entire planetary defense network by a factor of 10. Lisa nodded calmly. She had fought in enough battles to know that superior firepower did not always guarantee victory. What about their formation and approach pattern? Very organized, Admiral. They're advancing in a perfect geometric formation, maintaining precise distances between ships. Their approach vector is designed to give them maximum coverage of our orbital defense platforms. Dr. Peter Hayes, the military psychologist assigned to her command staff, looked up from his analysis screens. Admiral, I've been studying their movement patterns and communication intercepts. These aliens fight like a chess grandmaster playing against children. Everything they do follows classical military doctrine taken to an extreme level of precision. Lisa turned to face the doctor. Peter had spent his career studying how different fighting styles revealed psychological patterns. His insights had proven valuable in previous conflicts. What does that tell us about how to fight them? They're probably very good at defeating enemies who fight the way they expect. Their tactics assume their opponents will respond logically to superior force. But humans don't always respond logically, especially when we're desperate. The communication officer interrupted their conversation. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the alien fleet. They're demanding to speak with our planetary leadership. Put it through to the main screen. The image that appeared showed a tall, thin alien with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes. The creature wore what appeared to be a military uniform covered in symbols that probably indicated rank. When it spoke, its voice was translated by the computer systems into clear English. I am Commander Zixthara of the Kaleth Dominion. This planet is now under Kaleth authority. You will surrender immediately and unconditionally. Compliance will result in merciful treatment. Resistance will result in complete extinction. Lisa stepped forward so the alien could see her clearly. I am Admiral Lisa Carter of the Earth Defense Coalition. We acknowledge your message and request additional information about your intentions and capabilities. The alien commander looked confused by this response. There is nothing to discuss. You will surrender or you will be destroyed. These are your only options. With respect, Commander, we need to understand the terms of surrender before we can make that decision. What would happen to our population under Kaleth rule? What would be expected of our military forces? How would our governments be restructured? Dr. Peter Hayes watched the alien's facial expressions carefully as Lisa spoke. He could see frustration and confusion in the creature's features. The alien had clearly expected immediate surrender or defiant rejection, not detailed questions about administrative procedures. Your questions are irrelevant, Zixthara replied. Surrender now or face the consequences, Lisa maintained her calm, professional tone. Commander, you're asking us to make a decision that affects 7 billion people. Surely you can understand that we need time to consider all options and consult with our various governments. The alien's frustration was now clearly visible. You have 1 hour to respond with your surrender. After that, we will begin demonstration. Strikes on your military installations. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Lisa turned to her staff with a slight smile. Well, that went better than expected. Peter, your assessment. The psychologist was reviewing his notes from the conversation. The commander was completely unprepared for a rational discussion. She expected either immediate surrender or emotional defiance. Our calm questions about practical details seemed to genuinely confuse her. Excellent. That suggests their experience is with species that respond predictably to threats. Lieutenant Rodriguez, are our fleet dispersal orders ready, Lieutenant Sam? Rodriguez nodded from his position at the tactical station. All ships have received their scatter coordinates, Admiral. The moment they begin their attack, our vessels will spread out according to the chaos pattern we developed. Lisa had spent months working with her strategists to develop unconventional response tactics. Instead of trying to match the aliens in traditional space combat, they would use Earth's own chaotic nature as a weapon. Human fleets would spread out in seemingly random patterns, making it impossible for the aliens to predict their movements or concentrate their superior firepower. Effectively, the hour passed quickly. As promised, the alien fleet began targeting Earth's orbital defense platforms. The attacks were precisely coordinated, with multiple alien ships focusing their fire on each human installation. Within minutes, most of Earth's orbital defenses were destroyed. But instead of surrendering, the human fleets immediately scattered in all directions. Some ships fled toward the outer planets, others dove toward Earth's atmosphere, and still others accelerated toward the alien fleet itself. To outside observers, it looked like complete panic and disorder. Sam Rodriguez led the first human counterattack in his badly damaged fighter squadron. His ships had been caught near the orbital platforms when the aliens attacked, and most of his squadron was destroyed or disabled. But instead of retreating, Sam ordered his remaining fighters to accelerate directly toward the nearest alien cruiser. The Kaleth warship was over 3 kilometers long and armed with enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Sam's 5 remaining fighters were tiny by comparison, each one barely 30 meters long. The alien ship began firing at the approaching fighters, but Sam led his squadron into the debris field created by the destroyed orbital platforms. Flying through spinning chunks of metal and electronic equipment was incredibly dangerous, but it also made the human fighters almost impossible to target effectively. The alien weapons, designed for precise long-range combat, struggled to track small targets moving unpredictably through dense debris. Sam's fighters emerged from the debris field directly above the alien cruiser. Instead of attacking the ship's heavily armored sections, they targeted the weapon arrays that were actively firing on other human vessels. The fighters used their remaining missiles and energy weapons to destroy several alien gun positions before the cruiser could bring its defenses to bear. The attack did minimal damage to the massive alien ship, but it accomplished something more important. It proved that human vessels could successfully engage Caleth warships and survive. More importantly, it showed that humans were willing to use tactics that the aliens considered impossibly reckless. From her command center, Lisa watched, the tactical displays showing the chaotic battle developing throughout the solar system. Human ships were engaging alien vessels in dozens of separate fights, each one following completely different tactical approaches. Some human captains were using asteroids as cover, others were diving into planetary atmospheres to avoid alien fire, and still others were broadcasting false surrender signals while preparing surprise attacks. Dr. Peter Hayes studied the incoming reports with growing excitement. "Admiral, the aliens are having trouble coordinating their response. Their ships keep trying to maintain formation and follow standard tactical procedures, but our chaotic approach is making that impossible." "What's their reaction to our scattered attacks, confusion, and frustration? They're used to fighting enemies who try to match their organized approach. They don't know how to respond to opponents who seem to embrace disorder as a strategy." Lisa smiled as she watched Sam Rodriguez's fighters successfully escape from their attack on the alien cruiser. The young pilot had proven that human determination and creativity could overcome superior technology, at least in small engagements. The battle was far from over, but the first phase had gone exactly as Lisa had hoped. The aliens expected humans to fight like every other species they had conquered. Instead, they were discovering that humans approached warfare the same way they approached everything else, by trying every possible solution until something worked. Commander Zixathera was about to learn that defeating humanity would require more than superior firepower and perfect tactics. It would require understanding an enemy that refused to follow any rules except their own. Colonel Maria Santos crouched behind the rubble of what used to be a shopping mall and watched Caleth ground forces advance through the ruins of Denver. The aliens moved in perfect formation, their energy weapons sweeping methodically from building to building. They were efficient, disciplined, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. Maria had spent the last 6 months studying every piece of intelligence about Caleth military tactics. The aliens were masters of conventional warfare, but they had never faced an enemy that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of fighting dirty. Human military doctrine had been shaped by centuries of conflict between equally matched opponents, creating strategies that the galaxy had never seen. She pressed her communication device and whispered into it. "All units, this is Colonel Santos. Operation Chaos begins in 30 seconds. Remember, we're not trying to win this battle. We're trying to teach them what fighting humans really means." Sergeant Danny Kim received the signal from his position 3 blocks away. He was hidden in the basement of a destroyed office building with 12 other soldiers and enough improvised explosives to level a city block. Danny had learned his trade-fighting insurgents in 3 different wars, and he understood something. The aliens did not. Conventional military force was designed to defeat other conventional forces. Against an enemy that refused to fight conventionally, superior technology became a disadvantage. The Caleth forces reached the intersection where Maria had predicted they would establish their command post. The aliens set up their equipment with mechanical precision, creating a perfect tactical position according to their military manuals. They had clear lines of sight in all directions, good cover from enemy fire, and communication links to their orbital support. What they did not have was any understanding of human creativity. Danny pressed the detonator and the building foundation. Charges that had been placed 3 days earlier turned 4 city blocks into a carefully controlled avalanche. The explosions were timed and positioned to create maximum chaos without actually killing very many aliens. The goal was not to destroy the enemy force, but to separate it into smaller groups that could be dealt with individually. As the dust settled, Maria led her team in the first phase of their counterattack. Instead of trying to outfight the aliens directly, they focused on destroying equipment and disrupting communications. Human soldiers emerged from hidden positions throughout the rubble, fired a few shots at alien communication gear, and then disappeared again before the Caleth could respond effectively. The aliens tried to maintain their formation, but the constant harassment from multiple directions made coordinated movement impossible. Every time they attempted to advance in one direction, human forces would attack from another angle. Every time they tried to establish a defensive position, hidden explosives would force them to move again. Dr. Amy Foster watched the battle from her laboratory deep beneath the city. She was not a soldier, but her contribution to the war effort was just as important as any weapon. Amy had spent her career studying computer systems and network security. When the war began, she had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment possible: creating a computer virus specifically designed to attack Caleth technology. The virus was not meant to destroy alien systems immediately. Instead, it was designed to make the Caleth distrust their own equipment. The program would cause random malfunctions and equipment failures that appeared to be mechanical problems rather than sabotage. Over time, it would make Caleth commanders question every piece of data their computers provided. Amy had loaded the virus onto a portable device that could be connected directly to Caleth systems. The only problem was getting close enough to an alien computer network to upload it. This required a volunteer willing to undertake what was essentially a suicide mission. She had volunteered herself. Amy left her laboratory and made her way through the underground tunnels that connected the human resistance positions. Her mission was to reach the Caleth command post and connect her device to their main computer system. Military analysts estimated her chances of survival at less than 10%, but Amy was not concerned about the odds. She had grown up reading about humans who had sacrificed themselves for causes they believed in. This was her turn to add to that tradition. Meanwhile, Captain Rick Murphy was preparing for his own sacrifice several kilometers above the battle. His destroyer, the Iron Will, had been badly damaged in the initial space battle, but it was still capable of flight. Rick had received orders to ram his ship into the largest Caleth vessel in orbit, but he had decided to modify those orders slightly. Instead of simply crashing his ship into the alien flagship, Rick planned to broadcast a message across all frequencies while he did it. The message would serve no tactical purpose, but it would accomplish something more important. It would show every human in the solar system that their species was willing to fight and die rather than surrender to alien conquest. Rick activated his ship's communication systems and began broadcasting on every frequency humans used. His message was simple. "This is Captain Rick Murphy of the Earth Defense Force. We're going to show these aliens what happens when you threaten humanity's home. For Earth, for freedom, and for everyone we're fighting to protect." As his ship accelerated toward the Caleth flagship, Rick began playing music over the same frequencies. He had chosen an old song about human determination and the refusal to surrender in the face of overwhelming odds. The music spread throughout the human fleet and to resistance fighters on the ground below. The psychological effect was exactly what Rick had hoped for. Human forces throughout the solar system heard the music and understood its meaning. They were not alone in this fight, and they were not forgotten by their leaders. Even in the face of impossible odds, humanity would continue to resist. Rick's ship struck the Caleth flagship just as Amy Foster reached the alien command post in the ruins of Denver. The timing was pure coincidence, but the combined effect was devastating to Caleth morale. As their flagship exploded in orbit above the planet, Caleth ground forces watched their communication systems begin to malfunction due to Amy's virus. Commander, Zixthara felt something she had never experienced before in her military career. Doubt about the outcome of a battle. Her forces had superior weapons, better armor, and more advanced technology than the humans. But somehow, the primitive species was making her advantages meaningless through tactics that seemed to violate every principle of logical warfare. She studied the tactical reports coming from the ground battle and found herself unable to understand human strategy. The humans were not trying to achieve traditional military objectives like controlling territory or destroying enemy forces. Instead, they seemed focused on making the occupation as difficult and costly as possible for the Caleth. Human resistance. Fighters would attack Caleth supply convoys, not to capture the supplies, but to force the aliens to assign more troops to guard future convoys. They would sabotage Caleth equipment in ways that caused minor malfunctions rather than total destruction, making it impossible for Caleth engineers to determine whether problems were caused by enemy action or simple mechanical failure. Most disturbing. Of all, humans seemed willing to accept massive casualties in exchange for minimal tactical advantages. They would sacrifice entire units to destroy single pieces of alien equipment, and they did so without hesitation or apparent regret. Zixthara realized that she was not fighting a military force in the traditional sense. She was fighting an entire species that had learned to treat warfare as a problem-solving exercise. Where the Caleth approached battle with predetermined strategies and established tactics, humans seemed to approach it with pure creativity and unlimited determination. For the first time in her career, she began to wonder if her species had chosen the wrong enemy to fight. The humans were not stronger than the Caleth, but they were proving to be far more unpredictable than any opponent the Caleth had faced before. As reports continued to arrive, showing human forces throughout the solar system adopting increasingly chaotic and desperate tactics, Zixthara made a decision that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. She requested additional reinforcements from Caleth High Command, not because the humans were winning, but because she was no longer certain the Caleth could predict what the humans would do next. The war was entering a new phase, and for the first time in Caleth history, the outcome was no longer certain. Commander Tony Blake stood on the bridge of the converted cargo hauler Defiant Spirit and watched his crew turn a simple transport ship into something the galaxy had never seen before. The ship had been designed to carry grain between Earth's colonies, but human engineers had spent the last month transforming it into a weapon that defied every principle of spacecraft design. Tony's crew had removed most of the cargo holds and filled the empty space with missile launchers salvaged from destroyed military vessels. The missiles themselves had been modified with warheads created from mining explosives and guidance systems pulled from civilian navigation equipment. The result was a ship that looked harmless but carried enough firepower to seriously damage. A Caleth cruiser. "Captain, we're receiving orders from Fleet Command," his communication officer reported. Tony read the message and smiled grimly. Admiral Carter was implementing the next phase of humanity's unconventional war strategy. Instead of trying to build new military ships to replace the ones they had lost, humans were converting every available civilian vessel into an improvised warship. Dr. Helen Carter, Admiral Carter's sister, had been working around the clock to reverse engineer Caleth technology from captured equipment and wreckage. Her team of scientists and engineers had made discoveries that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. Desperation, it seemed, was an excellent motivator for scientific innovation. The aliens use a completely different approach. To energy management, Helen explained to Tony during a brief strategy meeting. Their systems are incredibly efficient, but they're also inflexible. They can't adapt to unexpected power demands or unusual operating conditions. This information had led to the development of hybrid weapons that combined human engineering with alien technology in ways that violated the original design principles. Human weapons were crude compared to Kaleth equipment, but they were also adaptable. When human engineers combined the two approaches, they created devices that worked despite being theoretically impossible. Tony's ship was equipped with several of these hybrid weapons. The main gun was a Kaleth energy cannon powered by a human fusion reactor and controlled by a targeting system that used both alien sensors and human intuition. The weapon could fire more rapidly than pure Kaleth technology allowed, but it also generated heat patterns that confused alien defensive systems. Lieutenant Commander Paul Davis was leading a squadron of similar converted ships toward a Kaleth formation that was guarding the approach to Earth's moon. The alien ships were arranged in a perfect defensive pattern that would have been impossible to break using conventional tactics. But Paul's squadron was not planning to use conventional tactics. All ships, this is Commander Davis. Remember, we're not trying to destroy their formation. We're trying to make them abandon it voluntarily. Paul's strategy was based on something human military planners called controlled chaos. Instead of attacking the alien ships directly, his squadron would create a debris field around the Kaleth formation using specially designed explosives. The debris would not be dangerous enough to threaten the alien ships, but it would be thick enough to interfere with their sensors and communication systems. Once the Kaleth were blinded by the debris, Paul's ships would move in close and begin what amounted to a knife fight in space. At close range, the aliens' superior long-range weapons would be useless, and human adaptability would become the deciding factor. The plan worked exactly as intended. Paul's squadron detonated their debris charges around the Kaleth formation, creating a cloud of spinning metal fragments and electronic interference. The alien ships immediately tried to move to clearer space, but Paul's vessels followed them into the cloud, staying close enough to make alien long-range weapons ineffective. What followed was unlike any space battle in galactic history. Human ships darted through the debris field like fighters, using chunks of metal as cover while firing their hybrid weapons at point-blank range. The Kaleth vessels, designed for elegant long-range combat, found themselves trying to fight in conditions that made their advantages meaningless. Communications Officer Beth White was monitoring the battle from Earth's command center while simultaneously working on her own contribution to the war effort. Beth had discovered something remarkable about Kaleth communications. Their entire command structure relied on perfect information flow between ships and ground forces. The alien communication system was incredibly sophisticated, but it was also predictable. Kaleth commanders made tactical decisions based on precise data about enemy positions, capabilities, and intentions. If that data could be corrupted or manipulated, the entire alien command structure would begin to make mistakes. Beth had been working with a team of human cryptographers to break the Kaleth communication codes. More importantly, they had learned to insert false information into alien communication networks without being detected. The false data was subtle and believable, but it gradually convinced Kaleth commanders that human forces were behaving differently than they actually were. The breakthrough came when Beth successfully convinced a Kaleth fleet commander that a group of human cargo ships was actually a squadron of heavily armed warships preparing for a major attack. The alien commander responded by diverting 3 battle cruisers to intercept the threat, leaving his main formation vulnerable to attack by actual human forces. Engineer Mike Johnson was implementing his own version of unconventional warfare on the surface of Earth. Mike had been tasked with weaponizing human infrastructure in ways that would turn entire cities into fortresses without appearing to do so. His approach was to modify civilian systems so they could serve military purposes. When needed, subway systems became underground highways for moving troops and supplies without detection. Skyscrapers were modified with hidden missile launchers that could emerge from seemingly normal building facades. Civilian factories were retooled overnight to produce weapons that combined human mass production techniques with captured alien technology. The most impressive example of Mike's work was the conversion of a major airport into what appeared to be a refugee processing center, but was actually a massive military staging area. Thousands of civilians were genuinely being evacuated through the facility, but hidden beneath the refugee operations was a command center coordinating resistance activities across the entire continent. Kaleth forces observing the facility saw exactly what they expected to see: a civilian evacuation operation with no military significance. They had no way of detecting the hidden military installations or the weapons production facilities that had been integrated into the refugee camp's infrastructure. Colonel Steve Parker was coordinating the overall strategic deception from his position in the hidden command center. Steve had realized that humanity's greatest advantage was not superior technology or better tactics, but the fact that humans had learned to fight wars while continuing to live normal lives. The Kaleth expected conquered species to either surrender completely or fight with dedicated military forces. They were not prepared for an enemy that could wage war using civilian infrastructure and ordinary citizens. Every human civilian was a potential intelligence asset. Every building was a potential weapons cache, and every normal daily activity was a potential cover for military operations. Steve's strategy was to make the occupation of Earth so complex and costly that the Kaleth would eventually decide it was not worth the effort. This required making every human action serve multiple purposes so that the aliens could never be certain which activities were innocent and which were part of the resistance effort. As reports arrived showing the success of these various unconventional tactics, Commander Zixathara found herself facing a completely unprecedented situation. Her forces were winning individual battles, but somehow losing control of the overall war. Human resistance was not decreasing despite Kaleth victories. Instead, it was becoming more creative and more effective with each passing day. The primitive species had somehow turned their own weaknesses into strengths. Their lack of advanced technology forced them to be creative. Their divided governments made them impossible to defeat through traditional conquest of leadership structures. Their long history of fighting each other had taught them to treat warfare as a normal part of existence rather than a special condition requiring special responses. Zixathara realized that defeating humanity would require the Kaleth to abandon everything they knew about warfare and learn to fight like humans. But if they became like humans, would they still be Kaleth? The question troubled her more than she was willing to admit. General Kate Morrison stood in the war room beneath the ruins of Washington and studied the global tactical display showing the final phase of Earth's defense. The planet's surface was scarred by months of fighting, but human resistance had not weakened. Instead, it had evolved into something the galaxy had never witnessed before: an entire world transformed into a weapon. Kate had spent her career studying military history, and she understood that humanity's approach to warfare was fundamentally different from anything the Kaleth had encountered. Other species fought wars to achieve specific objectives like territory or resources. Humans fought wars to solve problems, and they treated every problem as solvable if they were willing to pay the right price. General, we're receiving reports from all sectors. Operation Fury is ready to begin on your command, her aide reported. Kate nodded and activated the communication system that would reach every human resistance cell on the planet. The plan she was about to implement would violate every principle of military strategy that had been developed over thousands of years of galactic warfare. It would also demonstrate why humans had survived and thrived despite being one of the youngest species in the galaxy. Engineer Mike Johnson had completed his transformation of Earth's infrastructure into a planetary weapons system. Every major city now contained hidden military installations that could be activated within minutes. Civilian buildings had been modified to serve as missile launch platforms. Underground transit systems had been converted into supply and communication networks, and ordinary factories were producing weapons using techniques that combined human mass production with alien technology. The key to Mike's strategy was that none of these modifications were visible to casual observation. To Caliph forces, Earth's cities looked like they were functioning normally despite the ongoing occupation. Civilians went to work, children attended school, and daily life continued with only minor disruptions. The aliens had no way of detecting that every normal activity was also serving a military purpose. Mike activated the first phase of the planetary defense system by sending a coded message through the civilian communication networks. Within minutes, thousands of hidden weapon installations came online throughout every major population center on Earth. Missile launchers emerged from office buildings, energy weapons rose from subway stations, and communication jamming equipment activated from inside shopping centers. Colonel Steve Parker was coordinating the attack from his position in a command bunker that had been disguised as a subway maintenance facility. Steve had realized that the key to defeating the Caliph was not to fight them with superior technology, but to make the cost of occupying Earth higher than the value of conquest. All units, this is Colonel Parker. Operation Fury is now active. Remember, we're not trying to destroy the alien fleet. We're trying to demonstrate that controlling Earth will require more resources than they're willing to commit. The human strategy was based on a simple principle that the Caliph had never encountered, making victory more expensive than defeat. Every Caliph installation on Earth was simultaneously attacked by multiple human forces using different tactics and approaches. The attacks were not designed to succeed in traditional military terms, but to force the aliens to commit more and more resources to defending positions that had no strategic value. Captain Joe Martinez led his squadron of converted civilian ships in the space component of Operation Fury. Joe's vessels were former passenger transports that had been equipped with engines and weapons salvaged from destroyed military ships. The ships looked harmless and flew like cargo haulers, but they carried enough firepower to threaten major Caliph vessels. Joe's mission was to attack a Caliph supply depot orbiting Earth's moon. The depot was heavily defended and contained nothing that humans actually needed, but destroying it would force the Caliph to strengthen defenses around similar installations throughout the solar system. This would require them to divert ships and personnel from combat operations to guard duty. All ships, this is Captain Martinez. We're going to show these aliens what happens when you underestimate human determination. For everyone we've lost, and everyone we're fighting to save, Joe's squadron accelerated toward the Caliph depot using a flight pattern that appeared to be a desperate suicide attack. The alien defenders responded exactly as expected, concentrating their fire on what appeared to be a doomed assault by primitive human vessels. But Joe's ships were not trying to survive the attack. They were trying to ensure that their destruction would be as costly as possible for the defenders. Each human ship was equipped with experimental weapons that would overload catastrophically when the ship was destroyed. The explosions were designed to damage nearby Caliph vessels and create debris fields that would make the area dangerous for future operations. Joe's squadron would be completely destroyed, but the Caliph would lose several valuable ships and be forced to abandon a strategic position. Dr. Laura Phillips was implementing her own part of Operation Fury from a research facility hidden beneath a children's hospital. Laura had been studying Caliph psychology and had made a disturbing discovery about their approach to warfare. The aliens were not prepared for enemies who treated massive casualties as an acceptable cost of achieving minor tactical advantages. Laura's analysis showed that Caliph society had eliminated most forms of conflict through superior technology and overwhelming force. They had not fought a serious war in over a century, and they had never faced an enemy willing to accept devastating losses in exchange for small victories. The concept of Pyrrhic victory was completely foreign to their military thinking. This psychological weakness could be exploited by demonstrating that humans were willing to pay any price to continue fighting. If the Caliph could be convinced that defeating humanity would require them to become as ruthless and desperate as their enemies, they might decide that conquest was not worth the cost. Private Alex Turner was part of a ground assault team that was attacking a Caliph command center in the ruins of Chicago. Alex's unit had been given what amounted to a suicide mission: penetrate the alien defenses, disable their communication equipment, and escape if possible. The military planners estimated that the mission had less than a 5% chance of success, but Alex and his teammates had volunteered anyway. The attack began with a series of diversionary explosions that drew Caliph attention away from the command center. While alien forces responded to the obvious threats, Alex's team infiltrated the facility through utility tunnels that Mike Johnson's engineers had modified for exactly this purpose. The human soldiers moved through the Caliph installation using tactics that were completely outside alien military doctrine. Instead of trying to fight their way to the objective, they bypassed defensive positions entirely. Instead of attempting to destroy alien equipment, they sabotaged it in ways that would cause malfunctions during critical moments. Instead of trying to escape after completing their mission, they prepared to defend their position until reinforcements arrived or they were killed. Alex understood that his mission was not really about damaging one Caliph command center. It was about demonstrating that humans could penetrate any alien defensive position and that no Caliph installation was truly secure. Future alien commanders would have to commit additional resources to security, reducing their ability to conduct offensive operations. As reports of the coordinated attacks reached Commander Zix Thara, she found herself facing a situation that had no precedent in Caliph military history. Human forces throughout the solar system were simultaneously conducting operations that appeared to be carefully coordinated, despite the fact that Earth's communication systems had been largely destroyed by previous Caliph attacks. The humans seemed to be operating according to a plan that anticipated massive casualties and accepted them as necessary costs of achieving strategic objectives. More disturbing, they appeared to be treating the destruction of their own forces as a weapon against Caliph morale and resources. Zix Thara studied the tactical reports and realized that she was witnessing something unprecedented. An entire species that had learned to use desperation as a military strategy. The humans were not fighting to win in any traditional sense. They were fighting to make victory so costly that their enemies would eventually choose to pursue easier targets. For the Yule, first time in her military career, Zix Thara began to understand why some conflicts could not be won through superior technology and tactics. The humans had transformed their entire civilization into a weapon that became more dangerous the more damage it sustained. They had learned to treat warfare not as a contest between military forces, but as a test of will between entire civilizations. As she watched human forces throughout the solar system continue their desperate attacks. Despite impossible odds, Zix Thara realized that the Caliph had made a fundamental error in choosing to invade Earth. They had assumed that humans would respond to superior force the way other species had responded. Instead, they had discovered an enemy that treated superior force as simply another problem to be solved through creativity, determination, and unlimited sacrifice. The war was entering its final phase. Commander Zix Thara walked through the corridors of her flagship and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong. Her fleet still controlled Earth's orbital space. Her ground forces held most major population centers, and her weapons remained vastly superior to anything humans could produce. By every measure of military success, the Caliph were winning the war. Yet somehow, Zix Thara knew they were losing. The breakthrough came when Admiral Lisa Carter requested a direct meeting under a temporary ceasefire. Zix Thara had initially refused, seeing no point in negotiating with a defeated enemy, but the human admiral had sent a message that changed her mind. "Commander, I think there are some things about human warfare that you need to understand before this goes any further." The meeting took place aboard a neutral cargo vessel that had been designated as a temporary diplomatic facility. Zixthara arrived expecting to receive a human surrender offer. Instead, she found herself facing an enemy commander who seemed remarkably calm for someone whose species was facing extinction. "Commander Zixthara, thank you for agreeing to this meeting," Admiral Carter said, as they sat across from each other in the small conference room. "I wanted to discuss the current military situation and share some information that might be relevant to your strategic planning." Zixthara studied the human admiral carefully. Lisa Carter was older than most Kaleth military officers, with gray hair and lines around her eyes that suggested long experience with difficult decisions. She showed no signs of the desperation or fear that Zixthara expected from a defeated enemy. "Your species faces complete destruction unless you surrender." "Immediately," Zixthara stated. "I see no reason for discussion." Admiral Carter smiled slightly and activated a portable display device. "Commander, I'd like to show you something that might change your perspective. These are historical records of human military conflicts over the past few centuries." The images that appeared showed battles and wars that Zixthara had never heard of. Humans fighting other humans with weapons that evolved from primitive firearms to nuclear weapons over just a few generations. Cities destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. Entire populations displaced by conflicts that lasted for years or decades. "What is the purpose of showing me this?" Zixthara asked. Dr. Laura Phillips, who had accompanied Admiral Carter to the meeting, spoke for the first time. "Commander, we wanted you to understand something important about human military doctrine. We didn't develop our approach to warfare by fighting aliens or by studying galactic military theory. We developed it by fighting each other." Laura activated another section of the display showing statistical analysis of human conflicts. For thousands of years, humans have been fighting wars against enemies who were just as intelligent, creative, and determined as we are. We've learned to win against opponents who know all our tricks because they invented most of them. Zixthara began to understand the implications of what she was hearing. "You are saying that your tactics against us are the same ones you use against your own species?" "Exactly," Admiral Carter replied. "Commander, you've been fighting humanity's peacetime military. What you're seeing now is how humans wage war when our survival is threatened. We're not trying to defeat you using our strongest capabilities. We're using the methods we developed for fighting each other, because those are the only tactics we know." The revelation was disturbing in ways that Zixthara had not expected. The humans were not pushing themselves to their limits to fight the Kaleth. They were simply applying their normal approach to military problems. The desperate courage, creative tactics, and willingness to accept massive casualties were not special responses to alien invasion. They were standard human military procedures. Dr. Phillips continued the explanation. "Our species has survived by learning that sometimes the only way to stop a fight is to make continuing the fight more expensive than accepting peace. We've learned to make victory cost more than defeat." Zixthara thought about the reports she had been receiving from her commanders throughout the solar system. Human resistance was not decreasing despite Kaleth victories. Instead, it was becoming more sophisticated and more costly to suppress. Every successful alien operation seemed to require larger commitments of troops and resources to maintain. "What are you proposing?" she asked. Admiral Carter leaned forward slightly. "Commander, I want to show you something else. These are projections of what will happen if this war continues." The display showed mathematical models of extended conflict between human and Kaleth forces. The projections assumed that humans would continue to improve their tactics and technology while maintaining their current level of resistance. The results were sobering even by Kaleth standards. "According to our analysis, defeating humanity completely would require your civilization to commit approximately 60% of your total military resources to occupying and controlling Earth alone. That commitment would need to continue For several generations, while human resistance was gradually eliminated, Zixathara studied the projections carefully. The numbers were based on human assessments of their own capabilities, but they matched her own estimates remarkably closely. Your species would be extinct long before we reach those resource commitments. Yes, Dr. Phillips agreed. But your species would be fundamentally changed by the effort required to exterminate us. You would need to become as ruthless, creative, and desperate as we are. You would need to learn to accept massive casualties in exchange for minor tactical advantages. You would need to transform your entire civilization into a weapon. The psychological officer continued her analysis. Commander, if you succeed in conquering humanity, you will have learned to fight like humans. But if you learn to fight like humans, will you still be Kaleth? The question struck at the heart of something Zixathara had been trying not to think about. Her own forces were already showing signs of adaptation to human tactics. Kaleth commanders were beginning to accept higher casualty rates and take greater risks. Some were even beginning to use improvised weapons and unconventional strategies. Private Alex Turner, who had been captured during the failed assault on the Chicago Command Center, was brought into the meeting as an example of human military psychology. The young soldier had been wounded and captured, but he showed no signs of defeat or despair. Instead, he seemed genuinely curious about Kaleth military doctrine. "Sir, I've been wondering about something," Alex said to Zixathara. "How many wars has your species fought where the enemy refused to surrender even when they were clearly defeated?" Zixathara realized that the answer was 0. The Kaleth had never encountered an enemy that continued fighting after their defeat became mathematically certain. "Your species appears to be unique in this regard," Alex nodded thoughtfully. "That's what I figured. See, humans have been fighting each other for so long that we've learned something important. Sometimes the other side won't stop fighting until you make them understand that fighting costs more than not fighting. The problem is, we've gotten really good at paying those costs." The young human soldier looked directly at the Kaleth commander. "Ma'am, with respect, I don't think your people understand what you're trying to do here. You're not just trying to conquer a planet. You're trying to make 7 billion humans give up something we've never given up in our entire history. The right to determine our own fate." Sergeant Frank Roberts, another human prisoner, added his own perspective. "Commander, humans don't fight because we think we can win. We fight because we think losing without fighting is worse than fighting and losing. Your people seem to fight because you know you can win. What happens when you're not sure anymore?" Zixathara found herself unable to answer that question. Kaleth military doctrine was based on the assumption of inevitable victory through superior force. The concept of fighting a war that could not be won was outside their cultural understanding. As the meeting continued, Zixathara came to understand that she was facing a decision with implications far beyond the current conflict. Conquering humanity was still possible, but it would require the Kaleth to become something they had never been before. They would need to learn to fight wars that could not be won through superior technology alone. Admiral Carter made the final point that convinced Zixathara to recommend withdrawal. "Commander, there's one more thing you should consider. Humans have been watching this war very carefully, and we've learned a great deal about Kaleth capabilities and tactics. If your species withdraws now, we'll probably go back to fighting each other and forget about you within a few generations. But if this war continues, we'll focus all our creative energy on developing ways to fight Kaleth forces. Do you really want to teach humanity to see your species as a permanent enemy?" 2 days later, Zixathara submitted her final report to Kaleth High Command. Her recommendation was unprecedented in the history of her species. Complete withdrawal from the human sector despite overwhelming military superiority. "The humans are not stronger than us, faster than us, or more intelligent than us," she wrote. "But they have learned to treat warfare as a normal part of existence rather than an exceptional condition. They approach military problems the same way they approach all other problems, by trying everything until something works, regardless of cost."